Hi, I'm Joe. I'm an alcoholic. All of us here at White Chip hope that you've been enjoying our audiobooks and AA speakers. You are welcome to join our Facebook group. Just click the link in the description and say hello. If you support the Alcoholic Anonymous cause, please hit the like and subscribe button. We upload new AA content every day, so if you want to see more, hit the notifications button. This way, you'll be the first to know when we've uploaded a new video. Without further ado, let's listen to the next AA speaker.
My time feeling restless, irritable, and discontent, walking through life feeling like I'm doing time, when I can make it better almost instantly, right? And that's what I did. And that's what I did for a long time, right? And I was one of those alcoholics that I just did not like to be in a state of abstinence. I couldn't. The reason I drink is because I cannot handle life in a state of abstinence. And so I drink, and I drink until I have to get sober. Right? Till I physically cannot stay drunk anymore. Right? And then I stay sober until I have to get drunk. Right? Because I'm restless, irritable, and discontent. And that cycle happened to me over and over and over and over and over again. Right? Until I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. All right. So what happens if you take the sense of ease and comfort away from an alcoholic? How are they going to feel? The book says, restless, irritable, and discontent, right? Okay, now that's how I feel. I don't know about you, but that's how I feel. Okay? What happens if you take an alcoholic and you take away their sense of ease and comfort and you stick them in an AA meeting? How are they going to feel? Restless, irritable, and discontent, right? And that's how I felt, and I thought I was the odd one, you know? Because all of you seemed happy, right? And I wasn't happy, right? And all of you seemed at peace, and I wasn't very peaceful. I wanted to kill you, you know what I mean? Okay, and I could not understand why. And that's why we talk about that hole in the gut, right? You've all heard that, right? I used to say that when I first came in. You come in here, and it's like you've got this big hole in your gut you could drive a Mack truck through, right? And that was really true for me, right? And so if you take away the sense of ease and comfort from an alcoholic, my experience in sponsorship is that you have to replace it with something. You have to replace it with something, or they will run to the thing that gives them a temporary sense of ease and comfort, right? And Dr. Silkworth's going to begin describing what we replace that sense of ease and comfort that we used to get from alcohol with in the next paragraph. But before he does that, he's going to begin by walking us through what a spree looks like. And he's going to start talking about the second facet of the illness. We already talked about the allergy, which we know is an abnormal reaction to any food, beverage, or substance. Now he's going to begin talking about the obsession of the mind. Top of page, it should be XXIX. That's Roman numeral 29, for those of you who are challenged that way. Top of the page, about 3 lines down, where it says, after they have succumbed to the desire again. Everybody with me? After they have succumbed to the desire again. Where does a desire come from? Right here, my mind, right? That's where a desire comes from. So the first drink starts where? Right here, right? Right here in my mind. And it says, after I have succumbed to the desire again, and then, as so many do, the phenomenon of craving develops. They pass through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful, with a firm resolution not to drink again. This is repeated over and over and over and over and over and over, right? And that was the truth for me. And every once in a while, I have a mind that tells me it's okay for me to drink. It's what I call the great idea, right? I have a great idea, right? Last time, it was that vodka that did it to me, you know? I'm just going to have some beer, right? Last time, it was that gin. I can't handle that gin. I get in trouble every time I drink it. So this time, I'll have wine. Right? One time I got this really great idea. I saw in a magazine, I'm flipping through a magazine after a period of abstinence, and I saw this home brew kit, right? And I got a great idea. I said, if I brewed my own beer, maybe I could drink it safely, right? And on and on and on. Maybe if I took these pills rather than drinking, maybe that would be okay. Or maybe if I smoked that, or shot this, or snorted that, right? Maybe I'd be okay. But for a guy like me, to use alcohol in any form always leads me back to the same place. It always leads me back to the same place. And all those alcohol substitutes, all they did was lead me back to drinking, right? If you're a drinker like me, that was always the case for me, right? So I have a mind that occasionally tells me it's okay to drink, right? And then I begin drinking, believing I can do so. And then the phenomenon of craving kicks in. And then I'm not drinking because I want to. I'm drinking because I have to drink, right? And I pass through the well-known stages of a spree, which I did many, many, many times. And usually for me, the way that the spree would end is my eyes would open and I would be looking at the roof of the detox, right? And I said the same thing every time. I said, what the hell am I doing here again, right? Again, what am I doing here? Because every time I left detox, I said the same thing. I'm never coming back here again, right? And I meant it every single time, right? And so I was always baffled at how I ended up there again. You know what I mean? And I didn't think I was an alcoholic, but I always seemed to end up where all the alcoholics were. It was a baffling thing. So that's step one. We just went over it, okay? Step one. Now they're going to follow that with step two, the solution. And unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, everybody circle that, there is very little hope of his recovery. So now we're getting a little better. Now we're not hopeless. Now there's very little hope of our recovery. Okay? So we're moving up a little bit. Right? Now, Dr. Silkworth calls it a psychic change. Okay? A change in the psyche or the spirit. A change in the mind. Bill Wilson's going to call it something else. He's going to call it a spiritual experience. They mean exactly the same thing. Just like Bill's going to call it the insanity, and Dr. Silkworth calls it the obsession of the mind. Dr. Silkworth calls it the psychic change. Bill Wilson calls it the spiritual experience. They mean exactly the same thing. Okay? So again, problem in the top of the page, the solution, the idea of a psychic change, a spiritual experience, the idea of a power greater than me, restoring me to sanity. Right? It goes on to say, hold on. Oh, obsession. Let's talk about obsession for a second. We defined allergy. I want to define obsession for you. A thought or idea that overrides all contrary thoughts or ideas. A thought or idea that overrides all contrary thoughts or ideas. What does that mean? It means that I can have every evidence that drinking for me is a very bad idea, right? I can know from countless experiences what's going to happen, right? And because I have this obsession, right, every once in a while, my mind is going to convince me that this time it's going to be different, right? That's an obsession. And it will push out all that other stuff that happens, right? Now, I mentioned earlier that I have another allergy. I have this allergy to pollen, okay? But here's the difference. The difference between my allergy to pollen and my allergy to alcohol is this, that my mind has not told me today or in the recent past, hey, Rob, I got a great idea. You should go roll around in the grass. I think it'll be all right. Right? You see, I have no obsession when it comes to pollen, okay? But let me tell you something. If pollen had done for me what alcohol did for me, I'd have been snorting that shit, right? Getting as sick as I could get, right? Because that's how I am when it comes to drinking, right? But pollen doesn't do that for me like alcohol does. It doesn't give me that sense of ease and comfort that alcohol gives me, right? All right, now he's going to begin talking about what this solution looks like, right? It says here, men have cried out to me. Oh, wait a minute, next paragraph up. On the other hand, and strange as this may seem to those who do not understand, once this psychic change has occurred, the very same person who seemed doomed, step one, who had so many problems he despaired of ever solving them, step 1b, suddenly finds himself easily able, everybody circle that word, easily able to control his desire for alcohol, the only effort necessary being that he is required to follow a few simple rules. And what are those rules? The 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, in the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions book, the word rules actually, there's several different definitions of the word rules. One of them is the word principle. A principle and a rule are the same thing. Okay? And in the 12 Traditions book, in the beginning, the very forward of the 12 Traditions book, it says that AA's 12 steps are a set of principles spiritual in their nature, which if practiced as a way of life can do two things. Can expel the obsession to drink and enable the sufferer to become happily and usefully whole. Right? See, one of the things that happens to a guy like me when I work the 12 steps, that's the Traditions, when I work the 12 steps, is my obsession to drink is removed. Right? That's the entire purpose of AA's 12 steps. And the book gives us a great promise here. It says once this psychic change, spiritual experience in step 12 has occurred, that I am easily able to control my desire for alcohol. And let me tell you something. That has been absolutely true for me. And you're talking to a guy that could not imagine 7 days sober. I couldn't imagine 5 days sober. I couldn't get 3 or 4 days sober. I couldn't get 3 or 4 days under my belt. But somehow, by some miraculous way that nobody understands exactly why it works, okay? Because that's what newcomers say, well, why does it work? Well, we don't know why it works. We just know that everybody in this room who's worked this 12 steps has had this spiritual experience and no longer finds it necessary to drink. And I said it last week, and I'm going to say it again for those of you who are new or maybe have been here for a day or 2 days or 8 days, that if you will apply the 12 steps of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, if you will follow every direction in this book, you never have to drink again. Okay? And I'm not just telling you that because it worked for me. I'm telling you that because you know what? As one of my sponsors used to say, 3 million sober alcoholics can't be wrong. They can't be wrong. Either I'm wrong or 3 million sober alcoholics are wrong. Which do you think it is? Right? Okay. So, it's going to tell us when we get to page 85 in our book, this idea of easily being able to, that my problem has been removed. That it doesn't exist for me. That I'm not fighting it. I haven't even sworn off. Right? I'm not avoiding temptation. Right? That's the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous. Interestingly enough, the book Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't ever say it. I would challenge anyone to find it for me where it says, okay, stop drinking now. It doesn't say that, does it? You see? It doesn't say. That's what they do when you go to a 30-day treatment center. They say, okay, today's your first day of sobriety, and you're going to stop drinking now, right? And don't ever drink again, right? Our book doesn't do that. What we do is we apply spiritual principles to our mental and physical problem. And when we have the spiritual awakening, the desire to drink, the obsession to drink is removed. And that was true for me, and it's been true for many, many, many people that I've sponsored. All right? Now, all right. So this is what we're going to replace this sense of ease and comfort with that we used to get from alcohol. This idea of this spiritual experience, right? This idea of this psychic change is going to replace that sense of ease. I have a sense of ease and comfort today, right? I'm no longer that guy that when I'm forced into a state of abstinence, I'm restless, irritable, and discontent most of the time, okay? Most of the time. Some of the time I am, but most of the time I'm pretty okay, And all I have to do is apply these simple rules, these simple principles. Okay? All right. All right. Where am I? Oh, yes. Thank you. Men have cried out to me in sincere and despairing appeal, Doctor, I cannot go on like this. I have everything to live for. I must stop, but I cannot. You must help me. Faced with this problem, if a doctor is honest with himself, he must sometimes feel his own inadequacy. Although he often gives all that is in him, is often not enough. Everybody pay attention to this. One feels that something more than human power is needed to produce the essential psychic change. Okay? So, if there's something more than human power that's required to produce this psychic change, is my spouse going to keep me sober? How about my sponsor? How about a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous? No. And that was made very clear to me. Okay? By the time I came to Alcoholics Anonymous for what I know can be the last time, I'd been to 1,000 meetings, okay? I've been to more meetings, God, your dreary AA proceedings, you know what I mean? And it's just like, as I was so bored with Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, and I couldn't figure out, because they told me, meeting makers make it, and I wasn't making it, And it had to be explained to me that I'm an alcoholic of their type. I'm a chronic alcoholic. And meetings alone may be enough to keep some people sober. Okay? As a matter of fact, when they talk about that acute alcoholic I was mentioning earlier, that hard drinker, says that a change of environment may be enough to keep him sober. Maybe coming to meetings for him and not drinking, maybe that works for him. But I can tell you this, it didn't work for me. Okay? See, I need the whole deal, right? I need the 12 steps. I need the spiritual experience. Or a guy like me, because I'm of their type, is not going to make it, right? So if you're sitting here and you've been to 1,000 meetings, right? Maybe today will save your life, okay? If you've been to 1,000 meetings and you're not able to stay sober, okay? Maybe it's because you haven't applied the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Maybe you're sitting in the lobby of AA, which is what this is. It's the lobby of AA, but you've never taken the prescription, right? All right. Let's go over to Bill's story. We're going to hit Bill's story for about 15 or 20 minutes here. All right. You know, I had a hard time relating to Bill Wilson when I first got sober. The language in Bill's story is a little bit archaic. You know, Bill was a stock speculator. We call him a stockbroker. That's actually being nice to him. He was a stock speculator from New York. I was from San Francisco. He lived in a different time, in a different era than I lived. The only thing we had in common is we both liked gin. You know, but Bill. I think what's important to look at here, the first 8 pages of Bill's story, we're going to talk about the problem. And then we're going to segue into what we're going to start talking about next week, which is what did Bill do? What is the action he took to find a solution? And what actions did he take to get sober and to stay sober? And we know that he never drank again. Okay? So we're going to start right here. And, you know, I always look for where I can relate to Bill Wilson. And like I said, I had a hard time relating to him until I went to a workshop like this and they started kind of dissecting it piece by piece. And I could really see how my experience really mirrored Bill's in a lot of ways. And it says here, war fever ran high in the New England town to which we new young officers from Plattsburgh were assigned. And we were flattered when the first citizens took us into their homes, making us feel heroic. Here was love, applause, war, moments sublime with intervals hilarious. I was a part of life that lasted. In the midst of the excitement, I discovered liquor. I forgot the strong warnings and prejudices of my people concerning drink. In time, we sailed for over there, which is, of course, England. I was very lonely. And again, I turned to alcohol. Gosh, that sure was true for me. You know, alcohol was the best friend I ever had. It really is true. Alcohol was always there. Cities and towns came and went. Women came and went. Families came and went. People came and went. Jobs came and went. But alcohol, wherever I was, it always gave me that sense of ease and comfort till the very end. Till the very end, you know. My problem was alcohol, the solution, became alcohol, the problem, right? But that was way down the line, and by the time that happened, I still believed it was alcohol the solution. You know, I was still acting as if, see, I lost the ability to tell the truth from the false, right? Page 2. I took a night law course and obtained employment as an investor for a surety company. The drive for success was on. I proved to the world I was important. My work took me about Wall Street, and little by little I became interested in the market. Many people lost money, but some became very rich. Why not I? I studied economics and business as well as law. Potential alcoholic that I was, so listen to this, I nearly failed my law course. At one of the finals, I was too drunk to think, right, I guess that would qualify as a potential alcoholic, right? So by Bill's own admission here, he's a potential alcoholic. Just for a point of reference, Bill's 22 when this takes place. 22. Okay, so for those of you who are a little bit younger, maybe you're in your early 20s and you're in here, you don't have to drink a long time, or as long as some people, to be an alcoholic. Okay, Bill says he's a potential alcoholic at 22. Though my drinking was not yet continuous, it disturbed my wife. We had long talks when I would still her forebodings by telling her that men of genius conceive their best projects while drunk, that the most majestic constructions of philosophic thought were so derived. You know what we call that? Alcoholic bullshit. That's what we call that. Yep. Over on page 3. So remember, at the top of page 2, he's a potential alcoholic. Second to last paragraph on page 3. My drinking assumed more serious proportions, continuing all day and almost every night. This is only 4 years later. This is 1926. It says, the remonstrances of my friends terminated in a row, which is a fight, and I became a lone wolf. There were many unhappy scenes in our sumptuous apartment. There had been no real infidelity, for loyalty to my wife, helped at times by extreme drunkenness, kept me out of those scrapes. Now that's Bill's side of the story. Lois's side of the story, if you read Lois Remembers, is different. That's all I'm going to say about that. All right. Turn over to page 5. I know we're going quickly, but I have a lot to cover. Page 5. Top of the page, first paragraph. Liquor ceased to be a luxury, it became a necessity. This is 1930. Bill's only been drinking here about 8 years. Okay? Again, it doesn't have to take a long time to be a real alcoholic. Okay? Now, Bill went through a progression of alcoholism. Okay? Some people don't have that type of progression. I did not. I was an alcoholic from the first drink I had. Right? I was instantly alcoholic, just like that. I drank alcoholically from the first drink I had till the last drink I had. My first drunk was a blackout. My last drunk was a blackout. And most of the drunks in between were blackouts too. Okay? That's just how I drank. I did not have this luxury that Bill had of drinking somewhat abusively for a few years and then suddenly losing control. I was out of control from day one. So I can't relate to his story that way, but I can relate to when he was lonely, he drank. I can relate to the idea of having marital problems, having financial problems, getting in fights, right? Anybody here ever get in a fight when drunk, right? That you remember? Okay. All right. It says, bathtub gin at top of page 5, 2 bottles a day and often 3 got to be routine. Sometimes a small deal would net a few $100s and I would pay my bills at the bars and delicatessens. You know, if I could ever find a bar that would take credit, man, I'll tell you, I'd be set. It said, this went on endlessly, and I began to waken very early in the morning, shaking violently, onset of delirium tremens, right? And we talk about drug addiction, and I've seen a lot of drug addiction, and how terrible withdrawal from drug addiction is. But let me tell you something. Alcohol addiction, you can die in alcohol addiction. You know, and that's why I always encourage people, because back in these days, they'd have to hospitalize these guys in a regular hospital, which oftentimes didn't want them. Today, we have the luxury, and it is a luxury, to have places to take people who are detoxing from alcohol. And so if there's a choice, I would always opt to take somebody unless there's no room for them. I would always opt to take them to a medical detox where they can be watched. It says here, a tumbler full of gin followed by a half dozen bottles of beer would be required if I were to eat any breakfast. Now listen to this. Nevertheless, I still thought I could control the situation, right? So, what do we call that? Denial, right? Denial. Right. So there were periods of sobriety which renewed my wife's hopes. Gradually things got worse. The house was taken over by the mortgage holder. My mother-in-law died. My wife and father-in-law became ill. Listen to this. He says, then I got a promising business opportunity. Stocks were at a low point of 1932. I had somehow formed a group to buy. I was to share generously in the profits. Then I went on a prodigious bender, and the chance vanished. Bill says, I woke up. This had to be stopped. I saw that I could not take so much as one drink. Everybody underline this next sentence. I was through forever. Right? How many people ever said that? I'm through forever. How many people said it more than once? 3 times? All right. My kind of people. Right? It says, before then I had written lots of sweet promises, but my wife happily observed that this time I meant business, and so I did. So Bill realizes that he can't drink safely. Right? He is fully well aware that he cannot drink safely. Let's see what it says in the next paragraph. Shortly afterward, I came home drunk. What happened? Right? What happened? Right? It says, there had been no fight. Where had been my high resolve? I simply didn't know. Right? It hadn't even come to mind. Someone had pushed a drink my way and I had taken it. Was I crazy? So Bill's questioning his own sanity here. This is a perfect example of the obsession of the mind, isn't it? A perfect example of the obsession that his mind told him that he could drink, even though he knew. He knew that he couldn't. He promised his wife, right? And I'm sure he planned that it was going to be different this time, right? I'm sure he planned how he was going to do different than he had done the last time. But Bill doesn't understand the nature of his illness, does he? right? He doesn't understand his allergy and the obsession of the mind, right? By the way, at this time, if you read Lois Remember, she says that for 5 years, by this time in 1932, they've been trying daily for 5 years to help Bill stop drinking, and had been unsuccessful. Okay? It goes on to say, I began to wonder, for such an appalling lack of perspective seemed near being just that. Renewing my resolve, I tried again. Some time passed, and confidence began to be replaced by cocksuredness. I could laugh at the gin mills. Now I had what it takes. One day I walked into a cafe to telephone. In no time I was beating on the bar, asking myself how it happened, right? He walked into the bar with no intention of drinking, right? A little bit later on in the book, in chapter 3, we're going to get the example of a guy named Jim, right? And Jim's the traveling salesman who stopped at a roadside place to get a bite to eat, right? And he had a great idea, which I'm not going to talk about today, right? It says, as the whiskey rose to my head, I told myself I would manage better next time. But I might as well get good and drunk then, and I did, right? So then the allergy kicks in, and away he goes, right? He goes on to say, the remorse, horror, and hopelessness of the next morning are unforgettable. The courage to do battle was not there. My brain raced uncontrollably, and there was a terrible sense of impending calamity. And if anybody here has ever come out, and I know some of you have, come out of a drunk when you knew you blew it again, right? And you knew you let down your family and your friends. And you knew you were going back to jail. And you knew you were not going to be able to pass your urine test. And you knew your kids were going to look at you the minute you walked out of that bedroom with that same disgusted look on their face, right? You understand what he's talking about here, don't you? Right? And here's the worst part. He says, my brain raced uncontrollably. You know what the worst part of all that is? That as all that's going on, all I could think about was who I'm going to con. Where am I going to steal $5 to get a bottle of Gilby's gin? Right? That's the worst part. Right? It goes on to say, I hardly dared cross the street lest I collapse and be run down by an early morning truck. It was scarcely daylight. An all-night place supplied me with a dozen glasses of ale. My writhing nerves were still at last. The morning paper told me the market had gone to hell again. Well, so would I. The market would recover, but I wouldn't. That was a hard thought. Should I kill myself? No, not that. Not now. Then a mental fog settled down. That's depression. A mental fog settled down. Gin would fix that. That's my kind of guy right there. Boy, I can relate to that. So 2 bottles and oblivion, right? Now listen to this. You know, people say we're weak-willed people. Anybody ever heard that? Alcoholics are weak-willed people, right? You know, I tell you, I've sponsored a lot of people, alcoholics, but I've sponsored some drug addicts too, and I've always said, you know, you try to keep up a $500 a day habit without a job. It takes incredible willpower to do that, you know? But listen to this, he says, listen to the willpower of Bill Wilson here. It says, the mind and the body are marvelous mechanisms, for mine endured this agony 2 more years. 2 years of every day waking before dawn, right? Every day thinking about killing himself, right? Sometimes I stole from my wife's slender purse when the morning terror and madness were on me. Now he's calling the obsession the terror and the madness. Again, I swayed dizzily before an open window or the medicine cabinet where there was poison, cursing myself for a weakling. There were flights from city to country and back as my wife and I sought escape. What do we call that? Geographic, that's right. Then came the night where the physical, that's the craving, and the mental, that's the obsession, torture, was so hellish, I feared I would burst through my window, sash it on. I could really relate to Bill here, because in 1986, I almost jumped out a second-story window because I couldn't take it anymore. Any window jumpers here, by the way? Man, I am different. All right. Somehow I managed to drag the mattress to a lower floor lest I suddenly leap. Now listen to this. A doctor came with a heavy sedative. Next, they found me drinking both gin and sedative. This combination soon landed me on the rocks. Everybody underline that. You know what we call that? Dual addiction. That's what we call that. Now, we have singleness of purpose in Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay? And we're here to treat alcoholism, and thank God we are. Okay? But don't ever let anybody tell you that if you have a drug problem, okay, in conjunction with alcoholism, that you are not welcome in Alcoholics Anonymous. Because if that was the case, let me tell you something. Neither one of our co-founders could have attended. Okay? Because they were both duly addicted. Okay? And anyone that tells you anything other than that has not studied the history. All right. It goes on to say, people feared for my sanity, and so did I. I could eat little or nothing, and I was 40 pounds underweight. And I wrote right here in my book, dying. Right? Bill's dying. You get an alcoholic who's 40 pounds underweight, they are dying. Okay? And oftentimes it's because, a little medical knowledge here, because the body, from drinking so much, even though you may be eating food, the body, alcohol is a simple sugar, will actually reject the food in favor of breaking down the alcohol, which is more easy for the body to break down. Okay? So even though you may try to eat, you will still come in malnourished. And a lot of times we see that, right? Let's jump over to page 8. Actually, I take that back. Back to 7, sorry. I'd at least do that once a session, too. Okay, first paragraph. My brother-in-law is a physician, and through his kindness and that of my mother, I was placed in a nationally known hospital for the mental and physical rehabilitation of alcoholics under the so-called belladonna treatment. My brain cleared. Belladonna was a drug back in the 30s that they used to give alcoholics. It was made from angel trumpet blossoms. It's actually the drug atropine, and they would make tea out of it. And it's kind of the same concept of, what do they give heroin addicts? Methadone. Same kind of concept, that if you could recreate the same effect, you could wean them off the alcohol. So this is what they're trying with Bill here in the 30s. Hydrotherapy and mild exercise helped much. Best of all, I met a kind doctor, that's Silkworth, who explained that though certainly selfish and foolish, I had been seriously ill bodily, that's the allergy, and mentally the obsession. So Silkworth tells Bill about the nature of his illness. He tells him about the allergy and the obsession. He goes on to say, it relieved me somewhat to learn that in alcoholics the will is amazingly weakened when it comes to combating liquor, though it often remains strong in other respects. He says, my incredible behavior in the face of a desperate desire to stop was explained. Right? He says, understanding myself now, I fared forth in high hope. For 3 or 4 months the goose hung high. I went to town regularly, even made a little money. Surely this was the answer, self-knowledge. We're going to find out next week that self-knowledge alone is not enough. Right? It says, but it was not. The frightful day came when I drank once more. The curve of my declining moral and bodily health fell off like a ski jump. After a time I returned to the hospital. This was the finish, the curtain it seemed. My weary and despairing wife was informed it would all end in heart failure during delirium tremens, or that I would develop a wet brain, perhaps within a year. She would soon have to give me over to the undertaker or the asylum. Listen to what Bill says here. He says, they didn't need to tell me. I knew. I knew. And almost welcomed the idea. It was a devastating blow to my pride. I, who had thought so well of myself and of my abilities, my capacity to surmount obstacles, was cornered at last. Let's jump down to the next paragraph. And this is where Bill really hits his bottom, and I'll tell you what. This was probably the one paragraph in the book that grabbed me the first time I read it, you know. Because, boy, that last time I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, this is where I was, right here. It says, no words can tell of the loneliness and despair I found in that bitter morass of self-pity. Quicksand stretched about me in all directions. I had met my match. I had been overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master, right? And I'll tell you, I will never forget that feeling, right? I will never forget, and I hope I never forget that feeling, right? Now, what did Bill just do, whether he knew it or not? He just took step 1, didn't he, right? Now, there's a reason I point that out. Because let's look at the next paragraph. It says, trembling, I stepped from the hospital a broken man. Now remember, he knows his problem, and he's just taken step 1, hasn't he? Right? Fear sobered me for a bit, and then came the insidious insanity of the first drink, the obsession. And on Armistice Day 1934, I was off again. Let's stop right there. Okay? So what does that tell me? It tells me there is not enough power in step 1 to keep me sober. Right? Here's Bill. He's accepted the idea of step 1, right? He knows alcohol's his master. He knows he's defeated. He knows he's hopeless. He steps from the hospital a broken man, and it says fear sobered him for a little while, okay? But fear's not enough to keep us sober, is it? Right? Fear is not enough to keep me permanently sober. It can keep me sober for a while, right? But sooner or later that fear diminishes, right? And all of a sudden I get a great idea, right? I know what's going to make me feel better, right? All right. We're going to, I think, stop right there. The one thing I wanted to talk about is he talks about the insanity of the first drink. And if you look up the word insanity, I think one of the best definitions I've heard is less than sane or less than whole, right? And I've sat in meetings and heard people, they point up to the second step and they say, well, step 2 says I'm crazy, right? Anybody ever heard that, right? Step 2 does not say I'm crazy, okay? If you look through the book, as a matter of fact, for those of you who still have your books out, let's cross-reference this for a second here. Keep your finger right there and turn to page 38. And we'll end, I promise. Second paragraph down says, you may think our illustration too ridiculous, but is it? We have been through the ringer, have to admit if we substituted alcoholism for jaywalking, the illustration would fit us exactly. However intelligent we may have been in other respects where alcohol has been involved, we have been strangely insane. Everybody see that? All right, turn to page 40. Second paragraph down. Let him tell you about it. I was much impressed with you fellows and what you said about alcoholism, and I frankly did not believe it would be possible for me to drink again. I rather appreciated your ideas about the subtle insanity which precedes the first drink. Turn to page 92. First paragraph. If you are satisfied that he is a real alcoholic, begin to dwell on the hopeless feature of the malady. Show him from your own experience the queer mental conditions surrounding that first drink prevents the normal functioning of the will. Last one, page 154. Second to last paragraph on the page. Of course he couldn't drink, but why not sit hopefully at a table, a bottle of ginger ale before him? After all, had he not been sober 6 months now, perhaps he could handle, say, 3 drinks, no more. Fear gripped him. He was on thin ice. Again, it was that old, insidious insanity, that first drink. Right? All right, back on page 8. The insanity that we're talking about in step 2 is very simple. It's the insanity that comes right before I take the first drink. Right? They're not talking about clinical insanity here. Okay? If you're clinically insane, they mark your chart clinically insane, and you never get well from clinical insanity. If that's what they were talking about, then it wouldn't say on page 84, for by this time, sanity will have returned, right? We're going to end on that note. All I want to say in closing here is that if you're new, we have a way that will do for you slowly what alcohol did for you quickly. That really what the 12 steps do for a guy like me is they give me that psychic change so that I no longer find it necessary to temporarily find one through drinking. And that's it for today. Thanks.
Alright, if you'll stay seated just for a moment, we'll close the meeting. What does that mean? Well, okay. I think we'll just... Yeah. And we'll remind everyone of our 12th tradition, which states anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities, and for anyone who would like to join us in the Lord's Prayer.
Simple practice.
Our Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Keep coming back. It works if you work it.